Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are.
Oh my gosh. I do so, you would think that after a year of doing this, that, you have the hang of it, but, technology never ceases to amaze. So I apologize. I'm officially 3 minutes late.
Well, technology is really wonderful. Technology is wonderful when it works.
And when it doesn't, it's not, yeah, not ideal. But anyways, yeah, thanks for bearing with me, everyone. It's great to be here.
Hi, Nick. We've never met, but you edited my book.
Yeah, hi, Marcia. Yeah, gosh, how nice to see you.
Yeah, we've never met in person.
We've talked on the phone quite a bit. I've seen a lot of pictures of your family, but we've actually never talked face to face. So no, it's nice to do that.
So are you going by Emily today? Is that your wife?
Oh, so yeah, it's funny. Yeah, that's my wife. Yeah, I've got the fancy setup on her computer. So I am Emily. Yeah, it's nice to meet you all.
You can change that,
I know, right? No, it's got the fancy display, and it's funny. That's probably why I'm late, is because it was more complicated.
I'm checking to see if Peggy just forgot.
Hey, Mom.
Oh, Peggy's on.
Oh, she is?
But
I don't see her.
I
She's
can't
on,
see me either.
Oh,
I
she's
don't.
down there at the bottom. I don't see her face. but
Your
she's
camera is pointing up to the ceiling.
there. She is.
A little
Okay,
more.
where's the
A
top?
little more.
There.
Good to
There
see
you
you,
go.
Peggy. All right.
Ugh.
Okay, Peggy, you want to start us off?
Yeah, let's start. Now, the fabulous and who we've been waiting for, Nick Katleman, who's a master memoirist and helped Nancy and Marcia publish their books. So, adelante, Nick.
Okay, if I can interrupt Peggy.
Right.
I'm gonna give a
Excuse me,
little-
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Nancy's supposed to introduce Nick. Sorry.
Yes, I
There we
will
go.
introduce Nick. And some of you may have seen the brief bio on the flyer, but just a little further background. Nick Katleman is an author and a memoirist who is passionate about capturing authentic narratives and inspiring stories. After obtaining dual degrees in creative writing from the University of Washington and Cambridge, Katleman started his career ghostwriting and editing in Los Angeles. He worked on several titles relating to diverse fields, including memoir, finance, and entertainment. Katleman became a credited author in June of 2019 when Simon & Schuster published the memoir, You Can't Fall Off the Floor, which tracks the life and career of entertainment executive Harris Katleman. I wonder if there's a relationship there. The book has received rave reviews, holding the #1 spot in entertainment books on Amazon for several weeks after its publication. In 2019, Nick launched Storyflex, a memoir writing service that empowers everyone to be the author of their very own book. In this venture, Katleman has helped dozens of people preserve their legacies. As the lead editor of Storyflex, Nick works with authors and manuscripts at every level of production. Personally, I am forever grateful to Marcia Hackett, PubClub secretary, for introducing me to Nick, who edited, created the cover, published, and is now helping me to market my first published book, My Babies, My Promise, The Journey of My Soul. It gives me great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Nick Katleman.
Thank you.
One little interruption. After Nick speaks, or while he speaks, if you have questions, please put them in the chat icon. Thank you. Nick?
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks everyone. That's very, very kind to have me. One thing I wanted to ask is I'm trying to click I'd love to share my screen so you guys can see my presentation. When I click share screen, I'm getting the host disabled, participant screen sharing. Is there a way you guys could help me out with that? That way you guys will be able to see my screen.
Is somebody claimed as the host? If you're the host, then you can make him the co-host.
I think that's Sunshine.
Sunshine, you're muted.
I was in the process of muting everybody and I didn't realize I already muted myself. Okay, there is a way to share a screen without that, but I can do that as well. So hold on.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, there's such a lovely introduction. I'm sorry to pause it, but I want you guys to see this, the presentation that I have, so you can follow along and don't have to look at my face the whole time.
Well, before she mutes everybody, I'd like to say it was wonderful working with you when I did my book a year and a half ago.
Oh, thanks, Marsha. Yeah.
It was great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was so fun.
Share the screen now.
Yeah, it should be good. Okay, let's see here. So let's see. Have we done it? Can you guys see a big black screen that says Storyflex? Wow, we did it. Okay, great. All right, so that's so nice. I call this this presentation from pen to print, behind the scenes of a successful book. First things first. I mean, Nancy did a terrific job of introducing me, but I'm Nick. I wanted to kind of give you guys a sense of who I am. Obviously, Marsha and Nancy already know, but I'm an author. I'm a memoirist, and I started a company called Storyflex. And I kind of wanted to give you guys a quick question of how I fell into this very inspiring but unique kind of the industry of memoir writing. I started my career as a ghostwriter, writing books for hire, and I did a lot of books in business. So it was people reflecting back on their careers, and it was amazing. I loved that part of my career because I was really honing my craft as a writer and learning the importance of capturing other people's points of views, their perspectives, and channeling their kind of identity between two covers. And it was great. Really enjoyed that piece, but I really had a turning point. Nancy mentioned, she goes, well, Harris Katleman, Nick Katleman, there might be a relation there. The book that, one of the books that put me on the map. And there really was. Harris Katleman is my grandfather. After several years of my ghostwriting career, my grandfather said to me, Nick, I really want to write a book. I've been thinking about it for a really long time. Could we do this? And I said, absolutely. And this is a grandfather that I've known, obviously, my entire life, but I've had dinner with him twice a month, for forever. And I said, yeah, this will be fun, I guess. And I went over to his house, and in that very first interview, 2 minutes in, I said, I had no idea that this was a person in my family. I didn't know these stories that he had. And it was such an inspiring thing that it was like the moment that we were telling a story, he felt like he could invite me in to reflect on his life. So much came to the surface that I had never known. And it wasn't only me, it was my father, my aunts and uncles, my extended family. Nobody knew these stories about my grandfather until we sat and wrote the book together. So it was great that the book did well and it got published by Simon & Schuster. That's fine. But like the amazing piece of that was what it did for my family in bringing us together. And I thought, gosh, I really want to gift that gift to other people. So that's what I try to do with books. Is I'm fascinated in books that have a positive message and are kind of our mark against time, really giving us an opportunity to reflect on our lives and connect with the people around us. So I wanted to start with this kind of formative question. Why do we write? Everybody in this space is bound by a common interest in writing. And Nancy was kind enough to send me this the latest edition of the publication, and I read through, and you guys all have such diverse voices. But the writing itself it's something that has endured for so long. I mean, it's Mesopotamian civilization. That was 5,500 years ago. People were using cuneiform to write. And in my own life, I don't really know of anybody who hasn't dreamed of being a writer, even if they're not, even if they aren't a writer, they dream of writing a book. It's something that all of us, it kind of unites all of us. So, you know, why is it? What is it? Why do we like to write so much? What draws us to that? And I've kind of pieced together an answer over the years. I think what it allows us to do is to nick the membrane. And what I mean by that is we live our lives, we have our jobs, we have our families, we have our obligations, chores, whatever it is. And we never really have the opportunity to really reflect who we might want to be. And books give us the opportunity to do that, to comment on life, to nick that membrane and really give our lives meaning, say what we're thinking, and strive for like kind of a deeper truth in a lot of ways. They're a window into our underlying thoughts and feelings. And they're a way for us to be the profound kind of figures that we might all aspire to be. So to that effect, that's why I think books are so exciting. They allow us to comment on the world. However, there is a difference between having a passion for writing and producing a successful book. The skills that are needed to create a really positive performing book are completely different from the ones that draw us to writing or even make us good writers. And that is something to navigate. So in this kind of presentation, this is an ambitious presentation because I wanted to touch on a lot of different things that might be useful to you all, but I really divided it into 4 different things. We're going to talk a little bit about the writing process, move on to editing. I wanted to touch on publishing because this is the publishing club of Laguna Woods. And I also wanted to touch on a little bit about marketing and promotion because I know that's a very common thing that writers want to talk about is how to get their books out to the world. Okay, so here we go. Start off with writing. There's so much we could talk about writing, but I really wanted to focus on some of the high level stuff that I think can transform our books from okay to like really special. So we'll start with a quote from a mentor of mine. Expecting to sit down, crack your knuckles, and write a book is like picking up a violin for the first time and expecting to play the Philharmonic. And Richard Kenny's a great poet. He's a mentor of mine. And this is a kind of famous quote that is attributed to him and he says in his workshop, but it's so true. And the crux of this is that writing is not just an art, but it's also a craft. It's something that we have to practice at. So on one hand, you need to feel inspired and moved by something in order to write. But on the other hand, you also have to develop the technical skills. And that's something that we can talk about and we can teach. That's something we can all develop. We don't need to be genius or, some wonderkind in order to do that. So this is a question that I think is such an important piece for every author to consider. What makes a piece of writing pop off the page? It's getting more and more important to ask this question because more and more people are publishing and we need to distinguish ourselves and really stand out. And I always pose this question to the writers that I work with. And the common answer that I get is they go, oh, a good story. That makes a piece of writing pop. And I think that helps. I think that that's a very helpful thing to have a compelling, glitzy, flashy story. But I actually really don't think that's the full picture. And I think this is an important lesson for us to consider because, some of the best writing, it's not about the plot necessarily. It's about how the writing is framed. If you think about the Steinbecks or the Virginia Woolfs or the Hemingways or even memoirists, I mean, it's not the most compelling parts of the great books is not the plot. It's not a Hollywood action film. It's the way that it's written. And I truly believe that there's no such thing as a boring story. I don't think that exists. I think if you tell a story the right way, it becomes interesting. I think if you have a very boring story, it becomes more difficult to tell that story, to make it compelling, but it's certainly possible. So I wanted to look at an example to kick us off of demonstrating this point. This is D.H. Lawrence. He's a great writer. He writes a lot about animals. I'm going to read this very short segment of a poem that he writes called Man and Bat. Okay. And pardon me for moving my cursor here, but starts off, when I went into my room at mid-morning, say 10 o'clock, my room, a crash box over that great stone rattled the Via de Bardi. When I went into my room at mid-morning, why, a bird a bird flying around the room in insane circles. In insane circles, a bat, a disgusting bat at mid-morning. Out, go out. So this is just the opening. It's a funny poem. It's well written. I encourage you guys to check it out. But this has a piece of magic, I think. And even if we're not writing about vermin in our houses, that's not what your memoir or your poem or your piece of fiction is about. This has something in it that we can all learn from. And what that is an authentic voice. It's very clear. I mean, we all have that feeling. When you read those opening lines, and as you continue to read the poem, we all have that feeling of, if you have had a spider, in your bedroom, or a lizard gets inside your house, that get out of my house. This bat is inside, this vermin's in here and I need it to go out. And so we know something about the speaker by reading that. And I think that having an authentic voice in your writing is the key to crafting a compelling piece. And it's worth noting for everyone writing, me, you guys, everyone, that our voice is the strongest tool that we have as writers, because no two voices are identical. So in writing, I always encourage the writers I work with to lean into your authentic voice. Don't try to make it correct, make it you. And that's what's going to make readers, that's what's going to make readers want to read it, want to consume it. And the best minds in literature know this. If we look at, this is Frost, okay? He says, I alone of English writers have consciously set myself to make music out of what I call the sound of sense. I'll talk about this in a second, because the best place to get the abstract sound of sense is from voices behind a door that cut off the words. It is the abstract vitality of our speech. So here's what he said. If my wife is in the other room talking on the phone to her mom about, my wife is pregnant, about our baby coming up, she's excited and she's talking, I might not hear the exact words that she's saying, but I know the tone of what she's saying. I can feel her emotion coming across. So the sound, and Frost calls this the sound of sense. And he wanted to infuse the sound of sense into language, into written language. So if you think about it, it's the sound of sense. It's the language beneath our language. It's the meaning behind the words, the inner tone that lives within the sentences that we write. This is what we want to, we don't want writing that is sterile or wooden. We want it to have that subtext to it. So this is something, for me as a writer, this is very, very important insight. And hopefully it is for you guys as well. But it begs the question, should we write like we talk, right? If he's saying write just as we would speak, it's like, okay, should I just make a written transcript of what I say throughout the day? And I think if we all wrote down precisely what we said on a given day, I think we'd come across far less eloquent than we might hope to. If you wrote a transcript of this presentation, it probably would not be as eloquent as I hope it sounds. The reason being, spoken word does not translate perfectly to written word. So this is the challenge of writing, is the goal that we have is we want to capture our voice through story in whatever form that might be, memoir, poetry, fiction. But the challenge is that all we have are words. We have these symbols that we scribble onto a piece of paper, and we don't have facial expressions. We don't have hand gestures. We don't have vocal intonation. So that's really hard. How do you get the spirit, the animated spirit of a human being into writing if you don't have some of those other tools that you might get in a face-to-face or a Zoom interaction? So all this to say, I think by acknowledging that challenge, it's really helpful, because we can start thinking of how to circumvent that and using language to distill our spirit into what we write. So that's authenticity of voice. Aside from that, I wanted to talk about something else that's really important to keep in mind as we write, and that is theme. Okay, so having a theme is a really, really important piece because it gives us a little bit of structure. I always say that books are like people. They need a job to do. If they don't have a job, they kind of fall apart. So every book, the purpose of that book is to communicate a clear theme. And that's kind of that deeper meaning. If we're just telling stories for the sake of telling stories, there's only so much that makes the reader want to come back for more. So, when we're thinking about theme, it's important to ask, what is driving me to write this book? Why did I pick up my pen, or why did I start typing in the first place? What's that deeper meaning I'm trying to say? What is this story shape? What is the point of the story that I'm trying to communicate to my reader? And I'll give an example with that. It's a client of mine I helped him with his memoir. Amazing man, Father James Connor. And he's got a great story. He was in his early 20s. He's ordained as a Catholic priest. And he grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. And he was shipped off. They sent him off to Tanzania, which is Tanzania back then. But and he, worked there, and he did so many amazing things. He navigated the war in Africa. He hunted wild game for food to feed the village. He did amazing things. He built a hospital. He built the first girls' school. He also created a dairy program. He imported cows so that the whole region could be self-sustaining. I mean, the things that this man did, the stories he had were spectacular. But, oh, by the way, the amazing thing with his story was he didn't come back for 60 years. He was in Africa he left when he was 21 and came back when he was 81 because he fell and got injured. And he's like, I've lived my entire life in Africa, but I don't even know my family really. He was kind of had this isolated existence. So we worked on his story together. And I said, gosh, you're telling such amazing stories. This is fascinating stuff, but we don't really have a theme. What are we saying? So before we could write that story, we had to get that theme. So we worked on it and we found this. The only way to make a difference is to be a doer. Once we had this theme, it's only one sentence, but once we had this theme, all the stories started to kind of constellate. They came together in a really special way. It gave meaning to the arsenal of his stories. It explained his decisions to give up family, to give up money, to give up the benefits of living in a stable country. It created a common thread that connected all those stories. And so the theme is what kind of was the glue and the deeper meaning of his memoir. So overall, some writing recommendations. I always say, first thing, when in doubt, go specific. Now, what I mean by that is this kind of goes into the difference between memoir and autobiography. Memoirs tend to be slices of life where it's really kind of like a zoomed in moment of your life, whereas an autobiography is this kind of vague sense of everything that happened to you. And not to be mean to biography or autobiographies, but they tend to be a bit boring. If I say, well, I spent the first 20 years of my life in California, and then I went to college in Seattle, and it was pretty rainy, and then I got a job in the city. It's boring because you have nothing to hold on to. It's too much time. It's too general. But if I tell you what it felt like to walk into my first job at the age of 18, or, and the smell of the Xerox machines and how I felt nervous by looking at the guy with a nicer tie than mine, right? That's a moment that a reader can connect to. So when we're writing, go specific. It's really a benefit. I also think it's really important to define what you want to accomplish, your objective and your audience with your writing, because that will determine how the stories are shaped, how the writing is shaped. We talked about theme, really important to keep that in mind. That will be your structure and your kind of your guide rails as you go through. It'll help you know what to keep in and what and keep out. And the last thing, right within a structure, I'm not bringing up structure too much in this presentation, but gosh, the value of an outline, a book outline, I can't stress that enough. It is so helpful. A lot of people have the conception of if I have an outline, I can't be creative. It's too constraining. And the truth is, whenever I give my writers an outline, they get so much more creative because they don't have to think about what to do and what not to do. They know, I kind of have this lane that I can go in, and they can, within that lane, they can create and emote in their writing in a really positive way. So there's that. Let's move on to editing. Okay, this is the next piece. So Lauren Groff, she's a beautiful fiction writer, but she says, writing is a matter of millions of minuscule decisions, very granular, close work, and it is difficult to see the pattern of the rug when one's face is pressed to it. I think it's a really great way to encapsulate the editing process. Anyone who's tried to edit a full manuscript, I mean, a story is enough, but a full manuscript, you get that point where you just start blinking and you're this close to the manuscript and you're like, I don't even know, like, it's so hard to look at this objectively. And there's another great quote by Oscar Wilde. He says, I spent the morning adding a comma to my sentence and I spent the afternoon removing it. So that's kind of a similar thing where it's just, you're so close to it, it's quite difficult. So I think it's important to figure out, what do we mean by edit? It's such a broad term. And there's a lot of different types of editing. I'm going to use, you could talk to 5 different editors and get 5 different kind of verbiage in terms of how to quantify one thing from the other. But this, for the most part, are 3 main types of editing. And the first one you have is a developmental edit. Now, this is on a macro stage. So when we're talking about developmental editing, we're talking about confronting the project from 10,000 feet up. The value of this is that you get to really, you have the highest potential of improving the manuscript when you go the most general. And this has to do with a developmental edit. You're looking at the characters, you're looking at the plot, you're looking at the structure, you're looking at the big pieces and figuring out, maybe there's something a piece that you want to add. Maybe your manuscript's at 60,000 words and you want to get to 80,000 words and you're thinking, gosh, I don't know what to add and I don't know what to subtract even. The developmental edit can be a helpful way of really evaluating it on a holistic perspective and finding ways to increase the potential energy of your book. Going a little bit more micro is the next thing. I call this line edit. Line edit is kind of like minor restructuring and rephrasing. It's to maximize readability and flow. So with a line edit, you're not necessarily focusing on reinventing a character. You are focusing on making what you have the best it can be. And that might be, moving a paragraph, here to there, but it's not going to be moving chapters around that much. It's more specific than that, and can be a really helpful way just to make your book readable and accessible to an audience. And then copy editing. This is almost like a cold read, making sure that your book is not going to have any typos. Is going to be, there's no errors with it, and so that's something that can be valuable. I always think it's beneficial to get someone to do a cold read for your book, because all the books that I write, I always have somebody on my team do a cold read, because it's just too much, like to put that on yourself. And you don't want to have a typo in your book and then you'll have to stare at it and you'll have to answer questions. Someone will email you and say, you misspelled chimpanzee on page 74. It's the worst feeling ever, because you can't unprint. So, these are the kind of the 3 pieces. It's really, really important to know what you want out of your edit, because if let's say that you say, gosh, I really want to invent this character, I think that I want to elevate them, and then you get a line edit, you're not going to get that invite. So I like to say this because it's helpful for authors to say, to have a sense of what they're chasing, and have good expectations for editing. This is really key. An edit should never compromise your voice. If you're reading a pass from an editor and you're starting to see vocabulary that is not your own, this is no longer really an edit. Perhaps this is too strong. It's a hijacking though, right? They're taking, this is your book. It's very important to remember that, I think. So I think back actually to the project that Nancy worked on, that we worked on together. This was, her story. She had someone in her family who had a remarkable life, Louise Sullivan. And she had written, it's like 580 typewritten pages. And it was not, she's a very smart woman, the author of this, but it was not polished in any way. It was scrambled. A lot of it was not necessarily.
Can't hear it.
Of course I can hear it.
Oops.
But
I can't hear it.
Anyways, it was, sorry about that. It was not readable, really. So I had the unique and really exciting task of going in and trying to preserve her voice. It was really, really important to make sure that I wasn't using my vocabulary or my sense of humor in that manuscript. It had to be hers. And that's the key for an editor. You never want to veer away from your authenticity. Kind of going back to Man and Bat, no one would want to look at that. You could look at that and probably edit that based on a better grammar. But no, part of the grammar, the ellipses, the use of exclamation points, that's what makes it special. So that's really important. On the other hand, an editor should not be a cheerleader. If your editor saying, I can't believe this is unbelievable, it's so good, it's not a very good, that's not a great editor. Because the key here, it's the editor's responsibility to challenge your book and push it to its very highest potential. And you have to, when you work with an editor, it's very important to know that they're to feel that they have a base level of respect and belief in your book. Anybody who reads your book should have a base level of respect and belief. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have signed on to do the book. So, I mention this because it's very easy to get defensive. I feel like the editor turns on you. That's not right. The editor has to tell you the things to elevate your book. And at the end of the day, it is up to you 100% to either take those suggestions or leave them. And I think it's really important to come to each note from a place of openness and a belief that we're trying to get this manuscript into its best form. There's no egos. It's all about the book. And it's important to separate yourself from the book, which can be very difficult to do. Okay, so these are some of the things that you're getting at that I think are important to focus on in edit, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're working with someone else. Accessibility. I mean, books shouldn't just be ornaments for a shelf. I think that books, the best books are the ones that have coffee stains on them and they're tattered because they've been read so many times. That's what you want your book to be. You want it to be something that's revisited by readers. Now, your editor should be really focused on boosting the accessibility of your book. I'll kind of pose this rhetorical question to all of you. Have you spent more time reading this year or surfing the internet? I'm guilty that I've probably been on the internet more than I've read, and this is what I do. I mean, maybe not, maybe I'm 50-50. But if you think about it, as an author, we're competing with television. We're competing with movies. We're competing with social media for our readers' free time. So with that in mind, we need to make our books readable. They need to be snackable, something that's really fun to read and engaging. If you think about it, books are they tend to have the most payout, but they require the most amount of initial investment from a reader because they take the most time and they take the most energy. So accessibility, when I think about accessibility, it's about decreasing the friction of the English language. Your message is somewhere in those pages. In this book that I have here, there's messages, there's wisdom in here, and then the actual words, you have friction as you read. The editor's job, they should decrease the amount of friction of language while getting to the core of what you're trying to say. That's a really important piece. Another thing that you should focus on edit was a fresh perspective. I like this quote a lot. The first draft is black and white, editing gives the story color. I think this is true in a lot of instances. It's so easy to become blind when you're writing your own book. And it's quite helpful to get a third-party perspective. You can do things like beta reads from a family member or a loved one or a friend or whatever, where you essentially give it to a friend and get feedback. I always tell people, take that with a grain of salt or maybe a boulder of salt. Family members and friends, a lot of times they say really positive things because they love you and they're close to you. It's hard to get an unbiased look. At the same time, a lot of people close to you are not necessarily professionals when it comes to books, so they don't necessarily have a key. Some of their notes can be a little bit, maybe not the best. And I'm trying to be kind to everyone's family and friends here, but it's like if I went to a mechanic and said, oh, you should change out your radiator. I don't know anything about mechanics, right? So it's helpful to kind of get a point of view, with someone who's writing, and that's what you guys have with your club too, which is terrific. So I always encourage a fresh perspective with editing. Okay, so some overall recommendations. Getting a third-party perspective is a really valuable thing, whether it's in any regard before you print, because it'll just make you that much more confident when it comes time. Everyone has that anxiety when you're about to publish. And if you've gone through that, as one more step of editing, whether it's, with someone that you hire, or even if it is a family member it's worthwhile, you want to find someone that understands your vision, who gets what you're trying to do. It's not worth giving your book to someone who's completely not the demographic for it, because you're going to get a lot of comments and notes that are antithetical to what you're trying to do. Really important to remember, a first draft is not a finished book. So I see this all the time. Once you see the light at the end of the tunnel, I do this too, by the way. I think every author does. You start to think, I'm done, right? Like I can be done. You want to rush through and finish it. And I think that's the worst thing you can do, kind of. I think it's really important to take your time, and you've come this far, between edits, rest, give yourself a week, then relook at your copy and see if there's any changes to your manuscript. And don't think, I cannot think of a single book from any of the people in the industry that I know where the first draft is that close to the final product. It just doesn't happen. And finally, I think it's really important to separate ourselves from the manuscript. Okay, so let's move into publishing. And I'm talking about printing here. Okay, this is Salman Rushdie, the writer. When a book leaves its author's desk, it changes. It has become a book that can be read, that no longer belongs to its maker. It is acquired, in a sense, a free will. It will make its journey through the world, and there's no longer anything the author can do about it. Every author I work with has the sentiment of that release, that feeling that the book is no longer their own. And it's almost like a loss, like you're losing something that you spent so much time and energy on. It's kind of a bleak point of view. If that's not bleak enough, I have one more quote because I like this one so much. This is from Edna St. Vincent Millay. She says, "A person who publishes a book willfully appears before the populace with his pants down. If it is a good book, nothing can hurt him. If it is a bad book, nothing can help him." So, there's no end to quotes about the angst of publishing. But the truth is, I always tell writers, when you're getting ready to publish, take stock of the moment and be excited. This is an exciting moment in your journey. You worked really hard for this, countless hours, and it's worth really giving yourself a pat on the back because it's an exciting milestone. It really is. Want to talk about the independent versus traditional publishing models. You guys I'm sure some of you know about this, but and if you have more specific questions, feel free to send me notes and I'll get to them at the end. But, it's important to draw a line between these two models, and because, you have to make a deliberate decision as to which one you want. So the independent model, which is like self-publishing, you get more power over the book. Whereas the traditional model, you're going to have the publishing company essentially is going to own it, and they have their ability to impart some of their notes and do some things. So the indie model, it's very much you. You are really the publisher in a lot of ways. So whereas the traditional model, it's very important to know you are giving up some creative liberties there. The independent model, there's a quicker timeline from now to publication because there's just less steps. Traditional model, it involves writing a book proposal and a query letter and approaching agents. And then if you get an agent, which is an amazing thing if you can get that, they have to now shop it to publishers, and then the publishers have to slot it to their release dates and stuff like that. So it can be a couple of years. Certainly you can expect it to be a couple of years. So it can be worth it. I'm not dissuading people from pursuing that, but it's worth knowing what you're getting into. And then the finances are totally different. So with the independent model, you're not going to get an advance for your book, but you're going to get a higher royalty. It's 60% if you do Amazon, 60% for a print book, and 70% for the ebook. Whereas the traditional model, you're going to get an advance. Everyone always asks, how much is the advance? Which really varies. If you're writing Barack Obama's memoir, it's millions of dollars. If you're a smaller author, it's not, tens of thousands. But you get a smaller percentage on the back end. Instead of your 60 or 70, you're getting 10-ish. Because the the publishing house is recouping the advance essentially off of you. So, it's important to understand these two things. And each book, I always tell authors, after reading a book, I can get a sense of which one might be better. One's not better than the other. But what I will say is it's amazing that the independent model exists, because it hasn't. It's relatively new in the industry, and it has allowed more authors to come onto the scene, which is a great, great thing. For this section, we're going to talk more about the independent model than the traditional, but I'm happy to answer questions about the traditional at the end. But I want to talk about what made that independent model possible. The answer is this thing called print on demand, POD. The idea behind this, and by the way, Amazon KDP and Ingram Spark are the two main dogs in this industry doing the POD, although there are some other companies that do it. The idea is this: it reduces overhead because the copies are printed on an individual basis. So traditionally, if Simon & Schuster, we sign up, let's say I'm Simon & Schuster, I decide to publish a book, I have to print in bulk. So Simon & Schuster eats the 10,000 copies, the cost of production, and then they're making a gamble that all those are going to sell, so that they can recoup the printing costs and paying the advance. That goes away with print on demand because you don't have to print in bulk. You can print individually. So it's exciting because it means that more people who might not necessarily command a huge readership, they can still be authors. They can still get their stories out there. And that's a really cool thing. So the difference between these two things, Amazon KDP and Ingram Spark, these are the two biggest companies you're going to find in the independent scene. For Amazon, it's actually the preferred platform for Amazon sales. It's because, KDP is part of Amazon. So those books tend to do better. Actually, they've done a lot of research into that. And it shows that KDP books tend to outperform Ingram Spark books in terms of strictly on Amazon sales. On the other hand, Ingram Spark books tend to have a higher chance of getting actually into brick and mortar retail stores. So that's worth noting. If your end goal is, I want to be in my local bookshop, Ingram Spark can be beneficial in that regard. Amazon can only do paperback. They do not, you can't get a hardcover out of that. Whereas Ingram Spark has the option for both. In terms of uploading processes, KDP is easier. It's just user-friendly. Ingram Spark is kind of a pain, but it's still doable. And both of these give discounted author copies. What that means is if you, the author, wants to purchase a number of books, you can do so just for the printing costs and shipping to you. So that's a really nice feature. If you want to have the books for resale on your own, which we'll talk about in a second, or if you just want to have a bunch of copies to give to friends and family. So the simple question that I always get asked in this is, if I self-publish, is my book going to be in a bookstore? And it's a very reasonable question. And unfortunately, it's a convoluted answer, but I'll try to give the clearest one that I can. The key is that individual bookstores make the decisions on what to stock and what not to stock. So what that means is it's incumbent upon you as the author to convince a bookstore to either to stock your book. So, that can be a pain. You're essentially approaching individual bookstores, one to one. Now, the piece that's worth understanding here is that if I went to Barnes & Noble, if I hadn't gone through Amazon KDP or Ingram Spark, and I went to my local Barnes & Noble and I said, I got this great book and it's got these great reviews, whatever, they're not going to just buy it from me. They need to buy it from a wholesaler. And that's what these services do. They set your book up with a wholesaler, a catalog that retail locations can then buy from. That is how the industry works. So, what it does is it essentially makes it possible for those bookstores to carry your book. And then it's on kind of the author to try to pitch it. And that we'll kind of get to that in the marketing piece. One more thing I do want to mention, because this is a very common error that authors make. When you're setting up your book for Amazon KDP or Ingram Spark, you have to enable something called it's a wholesale discount. And what that means is it decreases it allows retailers to buy the book at a discount. So I'll give you a quick example. Let's say that my book is $20. That's the list price that I put on it. If I don't enable the discount, Barnes and Noble has to buy my book for $20. They're not going to make any money because the list price is $20. They'd have to mark it up from there. So, the key is you have to allow the wholesaler to sell to retailers at a discount, so to give them incentive to buy it. And there's a range. The lowest you can go, well, you can do none, but if you're going to do a discount, it can go from 30 to 55%, which hurts, right? Because it's like, really, am I going to do 50? Half? I'm going to do over half off. But that's, honestly, just the way the industry is today. I always recommend, if you want your book to be in a bookstore, max out the discount, because you're competing with other authors that are doing that. That's just kind of how the industry has moved. And then I don't want to get too granular, but the last thing too is you want to enable returns, which is scary. You want to do it. Means if Barnes and Noble, say, buys a bunch of copies and they can't sell them, if you enable returns, it means that they can then return the books to the wholesaler. You get charged the shipping on that, which is a total bummer. But if you don't enable returns, they're not going to buy your book. There's not. It's just that's kind of the way it's become. So I always mention those two things: the discount and the returns. If you're self-publishing there, these are some hurdles you're going to encounter. It's worth taking stock of these if you're getting ready to publish. You're going to have to deal with cover design, and it's got to be great, because that's the best marketing thing you have, is how it looks on the cover. Interior formatting. You don't want to open a book and have it be look like a Word doc. It has to look like a great interior file. Visual design, organization. If you have imagery in your book, very important to have those down and make them look professional. Ebook conversion. Ebooks are a huge way that people are consuming books nowadays. And then pricing strategy too is a piece. So I put these on just as like things that you should be thinking about if you're in this place. No two books are alike. Each one of these things deserves, from book to book, each one of these things is an individual conversation where, you're going to have to make a decision. Visuals. Let's touch on this really quickly. I think it's worth noting in this industry, I'm noting such an uptick in people incorporating visuals into their books. Memoirs are now always having images. Children's books, obviously, coffee table books, even poetry books. It's almost like half writing, half photo album in a lot of these things. So, I encourage writers, hey, take advantage of that. Put your visuals in. It makes it that much easier for someone to get through a page. It's helpful to break up the text. I will say, if in terms of self-publishing, there are different options for premium versus standard ink. So if you're doing color photos, it's more money in terms of printing, but the premium ink makes a heck of a big of a difference. I really encourage that. I've had some authors buy for the standard and they say, gosh, I really wish I would have paid for the premium. It's worth noting. This is an interesting thing. If you're feeling entrepreneurial and you really want to be in the trenches with your book sales, you can do this. You can launch a digital storefront with e-commerce capabilities. So here's the idea. You make a website, okay? And you essentially enable that website where you can process sales. So I can purchase your book if I go to your website. And then what you do, because both Ingram Spark and KDP have or will sell you author copies for very cheap, it's just shipping plus printing. That's all you cover. You can order as many author copies as you want, and then you can sell them directly to an audience through your website. So instead of giving away a royalty, you get 100% of the sale, but you're just covering essentially the shipping and the printing of the book. So this is a way to max. If you're feeling entrepreneurial and you want to try to make some money off your book, and you're okay to process shipping orders, I've seen some authors really come out ahead on this, like make some money. It's kind of a cool thing, but it's not a good option if you don't want to stay on it in terms of marketing, and you don't want to stay on it in terms of processing shipping orders. But I did want to bring that up. This is interesting. This is something that a lot of people are starting to do, legacy copies. So the art of bookbinding is a beautiful art that's kind of dying out, which is horribly sad. But a lot of bookbinders, they just do such beautiful work. And these are like leather bound, hand stitched I mean, they're artifacts. They're like heirlooms. They're pieces of art, really. And I've seen kind of, there's two buckets that this falls into, these legacy copies that you guys might want to be interested in, you know, exploring on your own. One is to be in the family forever, you know, to pass down. So I've had a lot of authors say, gosh, can you, Nick, I don't want a paperback or a hardcover. I want something special. Like I want something that reflects who I am and is going to last for centuries. And, you know, that's great. Other people try to make legacy copies and then they'll auction it off. So they'll have these like really unique, special books, like, you know, like special edition copies, and they'll auction them off to a high bidder, and it can be a really good marketing thing. So just thought I'd mention that. It's kind of a cool new way. Questions to ask yourself. I know we're running low on time. I know we started late too, but I'll try to speed up here. You know, what's my audience and how large is it? That's going to help you answer if you should go for a traditional or an independent publishing model. You know, how important is the physical quality of the book? This is going to help decide if you want a paperback or a hardcover, or even like a leather-bound thing. What are my goals in publishing? You know, if you want to just share your story within your circle, maybe you don't really need to focus on marketing that much. So great, you can kind of cut back on that budget. But if you want to become a bestseller and take your swing, you're going to want to siphon off a budget for that, because marketing is, you know, consequential. And then to what extent do I want to be involved with the business of my book? Kind of, we just talked about this, but it's, you know, are you willing to be handling the transactional side, or do you want to focus on writing your next book? You know, these are some things that are helpful. I always encourage people to think about these questions as they're in the publishing space. So some recommendations, I always say, choose a publishing route that matches, that suits your objectives. You know, you only get to print one time. So make sure that you're happy with your book, because you can't unprint. And then your book isn't just a story, it's a marketing tool. You know, that holding that book, you know, that's what's going to draw people in. The cover design, the way it feels, stuff like that. So finally, the marketing process. You finish your book, congratulations. Now it's time to learn a whole new skill set that has nothing to do with writing. It's just like, you know, kind of a pain point for a lot of writers. My wife works in marketing, and I hear her talking about marketing lingo all the time. It makes me think, like, what she does for a living, authors are expected just to know. Today, the challenge is no longer getting published, it's getting discovered. This is a very true thing for, you know, the great thing about independent publishing and print on demand is that it opens up the funnel. We can all publish. The downside is that there's more competition. So now you have to get discovered. Every book only gets one pub day. You know, for a film, you see trailers coming out before the release date. It's to generate buzz. Now, this is something that we should all try to do. If you're doing a traditional book model and they're doing a large first print, 5,000, 10,000 copies, whatever it might be, you better do a lot of pre-marketing work before it comes out to generate that buzz. If you're doing independent, you can kind of relax a little bit, because it's not like there's a huge investment that the publishing company or that you are making, but there's still some stuff that you can do to drive sales before the book is released. So I want to talk about some of those things. We're going to go into each one of these things, but building an email list is extremely helpful. Launching a blog and a website, great strategy. Ad campaigns are super effective. And then endorsements. We're going to pop into these. So start with an email list. This is a very useful tool. And I'm not talking about just sending out emails on your Gmail account. I'm talking about making an account with like a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, one of those companies that allow you to do custom professional emails and build subscribers. Now, the email lists allow you to do a couple things. First off, it allows you to engage with your audience, but it also kind of reflects your readership, and you can see how you're growing your readership. If you ultimately want to go to a traditional publisher with your book in your book proposal, and you have a subscription list of a couple thousand people who are kind of keeping tabs on you, that's like significant. That can make a difference between no deal and a deal. So building an email list is a very helpful strategy. And this kind of ties into blogs and websites because they should be synced. But if you build a website for your book, what it does is it empowers you to build connections with your readers. It's a really important piece because we're seeing that in the industry. The more successful books that are coming out is when the author and the readers have a connection, have a relationship. That makes readers want to engage and continue reading. And you can do that through a blog. It can take so many different forms. It can be your writing process. It can be, gosh, I don't know what to do with this character. Help me out. What do you guys think? Like anything that creates a dialogue with your readers is a really helpful thing. And the website, it makes you as an author feel much more professional. We live in a time where we Google everything that we encounter. So if I hear about a book recommendation, I'm going to Google it. And if there's a really nice looking website right there where I can read about the author and I can read about the book, I'm going to be more, impelled to buy it. So, Squarespace and Wix, these are two, and there's a couple more, many more, but those are the two I recommend. Make it really easy to build a website, and it's pretty cheap as well. So this is something that I encourage if you want to pursue an aggressive marketing strategy. Okay, digital ad campaigns. So times have changed. It's, the Burma Shave ads, like the billboards as you drive, those are kind of gone. Now it's the best way to reach readers is by the magic thing in your pocket. The way that digital ad campaigns work is that they're sponsored posts. So what that means is, if I'm scrolling through my feed, things pop up. Actually, look, next time you're on Facebook, look, it'll say sponsored next to all the ads. What this allows you to do as the maker of the ad is to hone in on specific attributes of your book that might appeal to an audience. So I'll give you an example. If I'm writing a memoir about like traveling through Italy, okay, I can specifically through digital ad campaigns target people who, are from that area or who love Italian cuisine or who express an interest in travel. So they're going to see that ad for the book coming up. So it's kind of a cool way of expanding your reach. Another great thing is you can run an ad campaign based on any budget. I could say $20 budget. It'll stop running once $20 is spent. So that's a really cool thing. Definitely worth exploring. Blurbs and endorsements. Okay, so the best way to get, like the place I don't know about you guys, but the place I get my book recommendations is someone that I respect says, you got to read this. Okay, I'll try it. We all have a limited amount of free time. So we tend to gravitate to recommendations of the people that we trust. So I always encourage writers, like sniff out people that you believe in, that you love, who might give you a recommendation for this. We live in a time where you can kind of track down anyone's email. Why not try? This is always something that I encourage, and it can also go on your back cover. If you can get a blurb from someone, this is also dependent upon what your specific book is, but this is a very, very valuable strategy is to seek out endorsements. And then Amazon copy. This is so important. These sell books. If you go to Amazon, you look at the first couple of lines, the attention grabbers, it hooks the reader. That copy can be more important than the first paragraph of your book. I mean, because it's what's equating to sales. So, this is very similar to writing a query letter, which we're not talking about that much in this presentation. If you're going to seek an agent, you'd write a query letter, but query letters go through rounds and rounds and rounds of editing. So should these, definitely take the time to write really poignant Amazon copy, throw it around to everyone. This is one that I say, just throw it. I mean, you don't need to be a writer to review these things. It should just be something that piques people's interest. Focus on trying to hook your reader with your Amazon copy. Can you guys still hear me? I think you can. My AirPod. Okay. So recommendations. Don't assume that your book is going to sell itself. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm going to publish the book and it'll sell." That's great. You have to do a little bit more work than that. You also want to define your goal before pursuing a publishing plan. If you just want to
kind of have it for your inner circle. You don't need to worry yourself about all these things. But if you want to reach a certain audience, you need to put a plan in order. And then finally, find ways to build relationships with your readers. Really try to be someone who it should be a two-way street. Engage with your readers if you can. And there's always new ways to do this. Okay, and remember, you're not alone. All these things are overwhelming for every author. We all signed up for this stuff because we love to write, not necessarily because we're marketing professionals. The truth is, it kind of should be intimidating because writing a book is a big deal. It's a formative moment in your life. But I do say, if the transactional, the business side of books gets you feeling too overwhelmed, it feels too much, I always say, go back to writing. That's what brought us here in the first place. Put a pin in it. You can always come back to the business side, but never lose your love for writing that got you here. And the last thing I'll say is the difference between what books that make it and the books that don't is resilience on behalf of the author. It's all about resilience and sticking with it. So keep going. I hope that's helpful. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Thank you so much for listening to me battle on.
You can unmute yourself if you have a question. There's a question in the chat box. It says, you can now send, whoops, I'm sorry. There's a question in the chat box about including your email in a book and the value or whether it would be a valuable thing or not.
So, Cheryl, yeah, when you say putting email in your book, so you mean like your email address? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can do that. There's no problem with that. My advice there is that it's not the most professional look. We live in a time where your book is probably going to be on Amazon. Pretty much every book published is on Amazon, and you can make an Amazon profile and you can have contact information there. So, to put your email address in your book, it doesn't really net you out that much. Another thing too is it's not like if you have a print book and there's an email in it, I'm probably not gonna type in the email from the book. I'm probably gonna Google the person's name and see if there's contact info. So, there's not a problem with it, but I wouldn't say it's not an industry standard thing that people do. So I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it's not a huge problem if you had a reason for doing so.
Another question in the chat box, how do you go about finding an agent? Yeah, so that is kind of a piece that, there's so much to that, and it depends on the genre of book that you're doing, because there's a slightly different, not even slightly, there's a considerably different path if you have a piece of fiction, if you have a piece of poetry, if you have a piece of nonfiction. But all of them, you're going to have a query process, and it's it's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot that goes into it. And with the query process, what you're essentially doing is looking at agents out there. And you have to find, the first step I would say is find the agents that you think are going to suit you. And I think it's really helpful to create an account with a website called Publishers Marketplace. Nick,
What's that?
When you ask that first question, there's an echo going on when you talk.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Still?
Yeah. We'll talk.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Echo?
you got an echo. You got a big echo going on. I don't know why.
I wonder why.
Doesn't sound that way here. No
Really?
here.
We can actually hear what you're saying, but there's a big echo on it.
Huh.
Yikes, I don't know. Yeah, what was it throughout the presentation?
No, it happened after you asked the first question to Peggy, do you have enough time or do you have more time? Whatever you said.
It's so weird.
I know.
I'm so sorry. Yeah,
Your voice, when you asked if we could still hear you.
You know what? Let me mute everybody except Nick, and that might solve the problem. So hold on 1 second.
I'm just going to mute everybody, and then I'm going to unmute Nick. Okay, where are you, Nick? Let's see. There. Okay, ask to unmute. So.
Okay. Can you thumbs up or thumbs down? Am I still getting the echo?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so nothing. I'm so sorry,
That's
guys.
okay. We can hear you, so it's okay.
Okay. Sorry about
Sunshine?
Yes.
Sunshine, it's Fred Cantor. I actually am hearing him fine. I'm not having any problem with him. Is it possible it's something on your end in your computer? Because I'm hearing him without the echo.
Yeah, I don't have an echo either.
Me either. It's
I don't have an echo as much as he's got very loud all of a sudden.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean to scream at you.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, guys. I'll talk slower so that the echo isn't as distracting. I'm sorry. I'll do my best. But anyways, going back to the first, you guys were asking the agent thing. Okay, so query process. This website, I'm going to put it in the. I'm type it in here. Publishers Marketplace is worth getting a subscription to. It's a monthly subscription, which is lame. It's too bad it's that way. So I always say, when you're getting ready to query, make the account, do your work, and then cancel it. It's because so you don't have to continue paying monthly. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to search agents and see what they have sold and see if they might be a good fit for your manuscript. It's very important if you're looking for an agent to find ones that are a good fit. And then you want to look individually upon their agency's website, and they'll have slightly different guidelines for what they're looking for in their query. One thing they have is you have to do across the board is a query letter, which it's like 350 words, very short, but it's a marketing document where you're trying to explain why this is a really great book and why you're the right person to write it. That's a whole world in itself that deserves a lot of focus. But then in addition, you need to write a book proposal if it's a piece of nonfiction, which is explaining why it's going to sell. And these are the documents that the agents are going to look at and say, is this worth reading? And you're going to also send a sample, by the way. It tends to be the first 10 pages, double spaced, Times New Roman. They'll look at a sample, and then they'll review and get back to you. You can query through their websites individually.
Nick, if you turn off your screen sharing, we will see you big again as a speaker.
Yes. Is that better?
Thank you. There we are.
Hi. Okay. So hopefully that's helpful. There's so much about the agent stuff, but that's kind of the query process. I encourage you to maybe do a quick Google search. You'll find a lot of resources. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, Nick, this is Scott. I was wondering, somebody had brought up the question of if you're going to create a website, to promote your books and stuff. They were asking, you had mentioned two of them. I think somebody wanted to have you repeat that information.
Yeah. Well, so to create a website,
right.
Why don't I put them I'm just going to type them in if that's okay. Squarespace is one. It's one I use. And Wix is the other. There are more, but I am very impressed with their price points. I think they're really reasonable. And the nice thing is you don't need, I like to fashion myself someone who has eclectic skills in books, but I am not a designer when it comes to computer stuff. So, but I can make a Squarespace website. It's pretty user-friendly. So that's a nice piece. It's not like you have to know code in order to do this stuff. You can do it in an afternoon, a long afternoon, but an afternoon nonetheless.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Of course.
I use Weebly and it works pretty easy too.
Weebly's great. Yeah, that's another option that a lot of people like. I've never done it. I've done Squarespace and Wix, but I've heard good things about Weebly too.
May I?
There several more questions in chat.
Not to obsess on.
I see.
Real quick, not to obsess about I was talking about it only in reference to getting instant feedback, because most people, 90% of the people I meet are willing to read my books, but they will not do an Amazon review. So that's where I was really coming from. Thank you.
I see. Yeah, I mean, that's too bad. The Amazon review is definitely worthwhile. I didn't go too much into, I didn't have time to go into that, but once you publish on Amazon, you absolutely want to get as many reviews as possible, because for the algorithm, it will, that's how you kind of climb the list in terms of appealing to, you know, new audiences and having your book show up higher, right? So you need that. If they won't write the review, that's just such a pain. I mean, you can't make them do it. I've had some writers, I've said, why don't you write a template email for people? If you already know these people, write a template, send it to them and say, customize it, you know, try to make it user friendly, but that's a tough one. You know, if they're not going to write the review, it's hard to force them. Let's see if there's any more. Nancy said, if I order a number of author copies, give or sell them to family and friends, can they still give a review on Amazon? Yeah, absolutely. Anybody can give a review on Amazon. You know, you just sign in. You actually can make an anonymous review, or you can sign in and it can have your little name on it if you're signed into Amazon. So yeah, as many reviews as possible, the better.
I have had trouble putting a review in if I didn't purchase the book.
Really? Interesting. That's not been, it popped up for you and said you haven't purchased the book, you can't review it?
Yeah, it just didn't allow me to do it. Whereas if I purchased the book,
right,
it was easy.
Right.
So funny, yeah. I mean, I wonder what that is. Maybe was that recent?
No, probably was about a year ago. But
yeah.
I could certainly ask them about that.
Yeah, because it shouldn't be that way, because, you know, and I certainly haven't encountered that before, because you can buy the book at Barnes and Noble and they're reviewed on Amazon. It doesn't mean that you had to buy it from Amazon, but I'll check. I mean, that hasn't been something I've run into before.
Okay.
Sunshine, this is Fred again. I have been able to put reviews on Amazon where I have not purchased it through Amazon. You just need to be a person who has an Amazon account to put that review on. And in fact, they will have reviews that will say verified purchaser, which means someone has purchased it through Amazon. The others are people who purchased it elsewhere. But you should try it again, because I even put something on not too long ago that I did not purchase through Amazon, but I put the review on Amazon. So yes, it can be done.
All right, I'll have to try again.
Also, I've discovered if you do someone a favor, like read their book or edit it, then ask them to review your book on Amazon. They'll do it.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Isn't it upsetting that we live in a world where it's like, well, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But this is the world we live in, I suppose. You know, gosh, I think it's because we all are ambitious and we all are busy with our own lives. But yeah, that's a really good point, Peggy. It's if you sweeten the deal in some way, maybe you can appeal.
Well, I have a comment with regards to reviews. That said, any of you who have read the Village Stories 2021, we got them from Amazon. So please go on to Amazon and give a review of that anthology, our most recent one.
Yeah.
And Nick, yours could hold a lot of weight because you are an editor, marketer.
Yeah, I'm happy to put one up. Yeah.
And so forth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
100%. Happy to do that.
And welcome to the Publishing Club, Nick.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Because as a speaker, our gift to you is making you a member and giving you a copy of our book. Not a wonderful gift, but a gift.
Thank you. No,
And you get all our emails too.
I love it. It's great. It's on my desk. It's cool that you guys do this. I think it's awesome. It's fun to, and they're short and they're snackable, so it's fun that you get a little taste of all the contributors.
And of course, you're being recorded, and we do put it on YouTube, so you're famous on YouTube.
There you go. Right, we're famous, right? We're all on screen somewhere.
Well, I personally would like to thank you, Nick, for your presentation today that was very comprehensive and all-encompassing of all the different facets from pen to in someone else's hands. And I learned a lot, even though you and I have had a relationship through publishing my book, but I learned some new things and took some notes, and I'm really glad this is going to be on YouTube so I can go back and refresh my memory on that. So thank you.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Yeah, it's great to meet all of you, kind of, in the way that we're allowed to. And yeah, I'm glad to be a part of it. And hopefully, I hope that you all, there's a sea of knowledge, but I wanted to, Nancy was telling me all about, and then reading this as well, reading the book as well, there's there's eclectic interests in the club. So I wanted to try to touch on a lot of things, and hopefully I hit the mark in terms of stuff that's useful to all of you.
Absolutely.
Well, excellent presentation. And I think, Nick, you'll be hearing from several of us, because you can't believe how interested people were to listen to you this week.
Oh, that's
You're
nice.
Exactly the kind of presenter we need.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
that. My only question is, when are you coming again?
You're too nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, one thing we did do also, Nick, is we have a newspaper publication in our village. It's called The Globe. Okay. And your presentation was published in there 2 weeks, Peggy, is that right? 2 weeks? 3 weeks in a row. So, through that and through word of mouth, and I'm in another group, the Intrepid Writers Group, we have some guests today who we hope would, after this presentation and hearing from various members of our board, would be interested enough to want to join.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So anyway.
That's great. I'm so glad. Yeah, it's cool. I'm glad you guys have this community. It's really special. Writing is, gosh, it can be such an isolating thing, can't it? So it's important to stick together and, I don't know, like Peggy, you were talking about having to do something for it shouldn't be that way. It should be more of a communal thing. So I always love coming and talking to communities just like these where, everyone's interested in sharing their stories in a positive way. And that's why I'm in this business. So it's a pleasure.
Well, also, we're seniors, so we are dying to leave our legacy. Yeah. It's really important to us. So,
yeah, I think there's so much value in that. I really do. So, hopefully this is a step helpful for you guys in accomplishing that goal.
It is. And we'll be getting in touch with you, I'm sure.
Great. Sounds good, guys. Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure let me know if any question, by the way, I'll just say this, any questions that you have moving forward, anyone who's still on, email me. I don't know if you guys have my emails, you can distribute it. Right? Feel free. Or go to the website. You can reach out to me there. But yeah, it's storyflex.com. But happy to
offer any advice I can.
Great.
And
All right, everyone.
before we run out of time, I just want to say thank you to all the new members who have come on board in the last couple of weeks. And I still have 20 books left in our arsenal, if you will, here at my house. And I'm looking forward to moving those into your hands. And just to let you know, if you do intend to come by and pick up before Thanksgiving, Saturday from 1 to 4 or Sunday, Monday, Tuesday from 1 to 6, I am here, and you know, send me an email or text me and let me know when you want to come, and I will be here.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Sunshine. Thank you, Nancy. And of course, thank you, Nick. This was enlightening, and you'll be hearing from us.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Same to you.
Okay.
Right after, as soon as I get this up to YouTube, I'll be sending out an email to all of you with a link to this presentation. So there you go.
And welcome new members. You're going to love the Pub Club.
Absolutely.
So with no further ado, adios. See you soon.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.